It's a great opportunity for us to learn offense, right? Move the ball, pass, cut. We just can't stand and watch anymore.
They said Sophie Cunningham was just another gritty role player. They said she was here to hustle, smile for the cameras, and quietly play her part while the stars took the spotlight. But this season, Sophie didn't just break that narrative, she obliterated it. She walked onto the court like she owned the air, everyone was breathing, and suddenly the WNBA wasn't just watching her, it was talking about her. Because somewhere between the battles in the paint, the fiery sideline exchanges, and the unfiltered postgame interviews, Sophie transformed from reliable teammate to the emotional engine of an entire franchise. And the shift didn't happen in silence. It roared to life in the middle of a season that was already on fire. She's no longer just a player. She's a statement, a challenge, and maybe even the spark that's about to change everything for Indiana. So how did she go from overlooked to undeniable, from quiet strength to the heartbeat of the league's most talked about team? Buckle up, this story isn't just about basketball. It's about power, defiance, and the moment Sophie Cunningham decided she wasn't going to wait for permission to lead. From the second Sophie Cunningham first laced up in Indiana, it was obvious she wasn't here to blend in. She wasn't tiptoeing into this locker room, she was kicking the doors wide open. Indiana was already buzzing with the electric arrival of Caitlin Clark, the towering dominance of Aaliyah Boston, and a young roster hungry to prove they belonged in the spotlight. But Sophie didn't show up to simply ride that wave, she came to steer it. Gone were the static, cornery three roles she'd been boxed into in Phoenix. Here, every possession demanded motion, grit, and a willingness to fight for every inch of the court, and that was oxygen for her game. Training camp wasn't just a warm-up for Sophie, it was her proving ground. She attacked every drill like it was the final possession of a playoff game, diving for balls no one else touched, barking out switches before the coach even called them, locking up guards 10 years younger like they'd wandered into the wrong league. Coaches noticed instantly. Teammates noticed instantly. She wasn't just another jersey in the lineup, she was a live wire, a player who could flip the energy of a practice or a game with a single possession. And in a system built for speed, aggression, and relentless pressure, Sophie Cunningham was suddenly more than a role player. She was a force. By the time the first games tipped off, it was clear Sophie wasn't just adjusting to Indiana's style, she was setting the tone. Every time she checked in, the air shifted. The crowd leaned forward, the bench got louder, and opponents suddenly looked a little less comfortable. She brought that rare mix of calculated chaos and fearless aggression, the kind of energy that forces everyone else to raise their game. And it all came to a boiling point in one unforgettable moment, the 17th of June, 2025. Indiana locked in a heated battle with Connecticut, tensions running high, emotions spilling over. Caitlin Clark took a hard poke to the eye during a scramble under the rim, and before the refs could even blow the whistle, Sophie was already storming across the court. In one swift, unapologetic motion, she sent JCS Sheldon sprawling to the hardwood. The whistle blasted, the crowd erupted, and the internet went into meltdown mode. The officials called it a flagrant. Sophie called it justice. And in that split second, she wasn't just a teammate, she became Clark's protector, the enforcer who would make anyone think twice before taking a cheap shot at Indiana's star. But for those paying attention, this wasn't about one shove, it was a declaration. Sophie was guarding more than just a player, she was defending the culture this team was building. She was making it crystal clear. If you mess with one of us, you mess with all of us. That moment didn't just make headlines, it lit a fuse. Fans across the league started seeing Sophie in a new light. She wasn't here to fill minutes, she was here to flip games on their head. Her averages 5 points, 4 boards, a steal or two didn't scream superstar, but the box score couldn't measure what she was doing. The second she stepped on the floor, Indiana's pace quickened, their defense tightened, and the energy spiked. She was the kind of player who could turn a flat night into a dogfight and drag her team into the battle, whether they wanted it or not. And that's what made her so dangerous, she didn't need to drop 30 to own the moment. Her game was about impact, not ego. When the offense stalled, she'd slash through the lane and take the hit for a tough finish. When the defense sagged, she'd rip the ball from a driving guard and spark a fast break. She played with that sixth sense timing that told her exactly when to crank up the intensity. And it didn't matter if she was starting, coming off the bench, or playing in the dying seconds of a blowout, Sophie treated every possession like it could change the game. That's why teammates respected her, coaches trusted her, and opponents knew better than to relax when she was in the lineup. Sophie Cunningham wasn't just playing basketball, she was rewriting the rhythm of the Fever one possession at a time. But just when people thought they had Sophie figured out, she dropped the moment that turned the entire WNBA conversation upside down. It wasn't a game-winning shot or a highlight reel steal, it was her mouth. After yet another frustrating loss where Indiana's offense looked stuck in mud, Sophie stepped up to the mic and, without hesitation, called out what everyone had been whispering. "No more motion offense," she said flatly, eyes locked, voice steady, no sugarcoating. The room froze. Reporters blinked. That one sentence wasn't just criticism, it was a shot straight to the heart of the team's identity, and within hours, it went viral. Caitlin Clark, the face of the franchise, reposted the clip with 4 words, "100% with you." Boom. Suddenly, it wasn't just Sophie speaking, it was a movement. Kelsey Mitchell called it the tone we need. Sydney Colson made a meme out of it. Fans erupted online saying she'd said exactly what they'd been screaming at their TVs for weeks. The Fever went from quietly grinding through the season to becoming the most talked about team in the league, not because of wins and losses, but because someone finally had the guts to say what was broken. And Sophie didn't flinch. She knew the risk. She knew it could ruffle feathers. But she also knew that without accountability, this team was never going to reach the level it was built for. In that moment, Sophie Cunningham stopped being just a player, she became the unfiltered truth teller of Indiana basketball, and the ripple effect was instant. That post-game Michael drop didn't just stir the locker room, it shook the entire league. ESPN debate tables lit up. Analysts split into camps, some calling her a fearless leader who just saved Indiana's season, others warning she was playing with fire and could fracture the locker room. But inside the Fever's walls, the reaction was crystal clear respect. Teammates weren't rolling their eyes, they were nodding. Finally, someone had voiced what they'd all been feeling. The next practice was sharper, faster, more urgent. Coaches didn't have to light a fire, Sophie had already done it. And fans? They were hooked. Ticket sales bumped, social media flooded with clips, and suddenly, Sophie Cunningham jerseys were popping up in the stands. She wasn't just a spark anymore, she was the identity. And as the schedule tightened, that edge became impossible to ignore. Every dive for a loose ball, every hard foul to protect a teammate, every chest-to-chest stare down after a whistle, it was all sending the same message. Indiana wasn't going to be anyone's punching bag. Sophie had drawn the line, and now she was daring every other team in the league to cross it. By mid-season, it was obvious Sophie Cunningham wasn't just riding Indiana's momentum, she was driving it. Every night she stepped on the court, she brought that same collision-of-course energy that turned routine possessions into battles. And it wasn't just about basketball, it was about setting a tone that demanded respect. When Caitlin Clark took another hard shot to the face in June, Sophie didn't hesitate for a single second. She stormed across the court and shoved the offender to the floor. Consequences be damned. The refs tossed her, the league fined her, but to the Fever, it was a message louder than any post-game speech. She wasn't just protecting a teammate, she was protecting the culture. And that's the part people outside the locker room didn't fully understand. Sophie's fire wasn't reckless, it was calculated. She knew exactly when to push, when to spark, and when to stand between her team and anyone trying to knock them off course. Her presence became a shield. Opponents knew if they came at Indiana, they were going to have to deal with her. And that aura, that edge, changed the way the Fever played. They weren't tentative anymore. They weren't waiting for the game to come to them. They were the ones dictating pace, forcing contact, making other teams uncomfortable from the jump. And at the center of that shift, Sophie Cunningham, the player who had gone from overlooked to unavoidable. Off the court, Sophie's impact was just as loud. She wasn't hiding in the background, she was owning the spotlight in her own unapologetic way. She showed up to games in bold, unpredictable fits, sometimes sharp streetwear layered over sports bras, sometimes playful cowgirl looked straight out of Missouri. Each outfit a reminder that she wasn't going to fit into anyone's box. Social media loved it. Her Instagram wasn't just highlight reels and posed photo shoots. It was messy dances with teammates, unfiltered gym days, goofy road trip moments, and the occasional bikini snap that sent her followers into meltdown. But even behind all the humor and personality, the work never stopped. Off-season mornings started before sunrise at her family's 75-acre farm, grinding through grueling skill sessions with fever trainers before riding horses, fishing in creeks, or clearing her head in wide-open Missouri air. She was still the same smaller-town competitor at heart, just sharper, stronger, and hungrier. Brands started calling GMC, Adidas, Quest Nutrition, but she didn't play the influencer game. She picked partnerships that matched her grit and lifestyle, not just her bank account. And that authenticity made her even more magnetic. Sophie wasn't just an athlete anymore, she was a movement, a personality, and a living reminder that you can be both fierce and real, stylish and grounded, deadly competitive and deeply human. And then came the moment that sealed her legend in Indiana. June 2025, Fever versus Connecticut, a game already dripping with tension. Caitlin Clark takes a shove, stumbles back, and before the crowd can even gasp, Sophie Cunningham explodes into action, charging across the court, locking eyes on the culprit, and sending them to the floor in one punishing motion. The whistle pierces the air, the refs throw her out, and social media detonates within seconds. Clips rack up millions of views. Fans flood comment sections with praise. Her jersey sales spike overnight. Analysts debate whether she went too far, but to the Fever faithful, there was no debate she was their enforcer, their protector, their heartbeat. And Sophie, she didn't waste a single word defending herself. She let the footage speak. She let the fire in her play explain exactly why she reacted the way she did. Because for her, this wasn't about headlines, it was about sending a message that Indiana Fever basketball would not be pushed around. That act, reckless to some and heroic to others, captured everything Sophie Cunningham had become. The fearless veteran who would risk her own reputation, fines, and ejections to stand up for her squad. It wasn't the kind of leadership you draw on a whiteboard. It was raw, it was instinctive, and it made her the emotional anchor of a team that was suddenly playing with a chip on its shoulder the size of the entire league. What most people missed is that Sophie's rise wasn't an accident. It was the product of years of grinding in the shadows, sharpening her edge while others settled into comfort. When she left Phoenix, she admitted she'd grown too comfortable there. In Indiana, there was no comfort zone. Every day was a battle for relevance on a roster stacked with hungry talent and young stars. But Sophie didn't just survive that fight, she thrived in it. She became the player who set the standard in practice, who pushed rookies harder, who called out lapses in effort, even when it meant getting under people's skin. And that's exactly why her voice carried weight. She wasn't talking from the bench, she was in the trenches, backing it up with every hard foul, every clutch three, every chase down rebound. Her game became proof that leadership isn't about being the loudest in the room. It's about showing you're willing to bleed for the jersey you wear. By late summer, her connection with Caitlin Clark had evolved into something that was both tactical and emotional. On the court, they moved in sync Sophie, setting screens, freeing Caitlin for open shots, Clark feeding Sophie in transition. Off the court, they became inseparable, trading jokes on social media, syncing outfits for pre-game entrances, and even sharing quiet moments of prayer before big games. For the Fever's fans, it was a dream pairing the franchise's young superstar and the veteran warrior who had her back no matter what. And make no mistake, Caitlin felt it too. Every time she reposted a Sophie moment, every time she backed her publicly, it sent the message that their bond wasn't just for show. They were building a culture together, and it was infectious. Younger players fed off it, the locker room got tighter, and suddenly Indiana was no longer just a developing team. They were a squad that believed they could take down anyone. Off the hardwood, Sophie doubled down on building her identity as more than an athlete. Her charity work in Indiana exploded, from hosting youth clinics to launching her Sophie Cunningham Classic, an event designed to spotlight and mentor young Midwestern athletes who didn't have the same exposure as big city prospects. She spent time at the Ronald McDonald House, surprising kids with signed jerseys and shooting contests. She wasn't doing it for PR. She was doing it because she remembered being that kid, looking up to the older players and dreaming about her shot. And fans saw that authenticity. They showed up in droves, not just to watch her play, but to thank her for showing up in their communities. In a sports world often dominated by brand deals and highlight reels, Sophie was proving that you can be fierce on the court and deeply grounded off it, and that balance only made her fan base grow stronger. As the season charged toward its final stretch, Sophie Cunningham wasn't just a role player anymore. She was the Fever's identity, the enforcer, the truth teller, the culture keeper. Every dive for a ball, every word in a huddle, every protective shove for a teammate added to the legend she was building in Indiana. And here's the truth, you can't coach that. You can't draw it on a clipboard. You can't buy it in free agency. It's the kind of fire that lives in a player's DNA, and once a team has it, they protect it at all costs. For the Fever, Sophie wasn't just helping them win games, she was shaping who they were going to be for years to come. And for a league that thrives on personalities as much as talent, Sophie Cunningham had carved out a space that was entirely her own, a place where fearlessness, loyalty, and grit meet under one name. The story isn't over yet, but if this season has proved anything, it's that Sophie isn't waiting for history to remember her. She's writing it in real time. Sophie Cunningham walked into Indiana as a veteran looking for a fresh start, and somewhere along the way, she became the fire that fueled an entire franchise. She didn't need a captain's badge, a max contract, or a marketing campaign to claim her place. She took it. With grit that can't be faked, loyalty that can't be bought, and a voice that cuts through the noise, she's transformed from solid role player into the Fever's unshakable heartbeat. Every time she dives across the floor, stands up to an opponent, or calls out her own team, she's reminding the league that basketball is about more than talent, it's about fight. And Sophie's fight has lit something in Indiana that won't burn out anytime soon. She's not just protecting Caitlin Clark, she's protecting a culture. She's not just racking up minutes, she's rewriting the standard for what wearing a Fever jersey means. And if the rest of the WNBA hasn't figured it out yet, they will soon, because Sophie Cunningham isn't playing to fit in. She's playing to leave a mark so deep, Indiana basketball will feel it long after she's gone.